today we are the only vegan and sustainable alternative to leather that is commercially available at scale on the market.
Welcome to the Business for Good podcast, a show where we spotlight companies making money by making the world a better place. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and if you share a passion for using commerce to solve many of the world's most pressing problems, then this is the show for you. Hello, listeners, and welcome to your 66th episode of the Business for Good podcast. Before we talk about this episode's guest, let me first just say how overwhelmed I was by the response to the last episode with billionaire investor and author Jim Melanie. Listeners were very enthused that someone of such means is as passionate about saving animals as Jim is, and they were psyched to learn that he is helping finance the animal-free protein space. Lots of people had questions or even occasional disagreements with him about certain topics we discussed, for example, how quickly cultivated meat is going to reach price parity with meat from slaughtered animals, and it's generated a lot of good discussion and a ton of comments via our web form on the website, businessforgoodpodcast.com. So if you've not yet listened to episode 65 with Jim Melanie, make sure after listening to this one that you go back and check it out, since it was a particularly popular one. And feel free, of course, to let me know what you thought too. And while I'm talking about things that you should feel free to do, of course, please take a moment to give a 5-star rating to this podcast on whatever podcast app you prefer, or on all of them. Now, speaking of popular, it is often that we hear some really cool and promising new technology that's allegedly going to change the game, but only once that tech is scaled and commercialized. In this episode, however, we are featuring a startup that not only has some cool technology, they've already commercialized it with hundreds of customers, including some very big names in the fashion world. Mélanie Broyé-Engelkes is the CEO of Ananas Anam, which makes Piñatex. Now, for those of you who aren't fluent in Spanish, piña means pineapple. And it was founded by a woman in Spain, which is why it's called that. And it gives you a sense of what Melanie and her team are doing with their B2B material startup. You see, when it comes to leather alternatives, most of them are made from fossil fuel-derived plastics. Aside from the obvious environmental concerns, there are functionality concerns which such plastics do. We often hear about really encouraging new sustainable materials like so-called mushroom leather or cactus leather, or even leather from collagen that was grown in a controlled environment. But as promising as those solutions are, they aren't yet really commercialized in any meaningful sense. Enter Piñatex. It is a leather alternative that's made from the leaves of the pineapple plant, which are typically considered an agricultural waste product. These upcycled leaves are converted into a functional and luxurious feeling material that can be used for everything from shoes to handbags and more. And indeed, that is already what is happening. Today, brands like Hugo Boss, H&M, and hundreds of others are using Piñatex in their designs, setting Ananas Anam apart from many of the alternative materials makers out there. In this episode, Melanie shares the company's origin story, telling us where they've been, where they're going, and more. It's an inspiring tale, so let me get out of the way so you can hear it directly from her. Melanie, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Hello, Paul. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, it is my pleasure to have you on. In fact, it's a great honor because I'm really impressed by the success that your company has had, primarily in that you are not only creating something like very cool and sustainable, but that you've really already commercialized it with hundreds of customers. So we're going to get into that later. But before we talk about how far you have commercialized Piñatex, let's hear, what is this? So, when I first heard about this, I was thinking pineapple leather. And I was first thinking this must be the skin of the pineapple that we all throw out. And then I read, no, it's the pineapple leaves. And I was thinking, so this is like those top little spiky leaves that are at the top that we all throw out. But that's not what it is. So what is Piñatex?
Yes, it's very important to specify that, and thanks for starting with that. I mean, first of all, I would start with actually the company, Ananas Anam. So the aim of the company is really to meet the challenges of our times by really developing products in which commercial success is integrated and promotes social, cultural, and ecological developments. And Piñatex is the first product that has been, as you said, commercialized already a few years ago in 2017. And Piñatex is an innovative, it's a patented, ethically produced material. It's a natural textile that is actually made from the pineapple leaf fibers from the plant. So it's not the fruit itself. We're really looking at the plant, which actually becomes waste once the pineapple has been harvested.
Okay. So just for folks who are as unfamiliar with this as I was prior to a few days ago, so I had to Google anatomy of a pineapple plant in order to figure this out. And so maybe you, listener, will want to do that as well. But we're talking here about these leaves that grow at the bottom of a pineapple that the customer never sees. So you see a pineapple with these spikes on the top. That's not what we're talking about. These are leaves that grow at the bottom. And when the pineapple is harvested from the field, those leaves are left in the field. And that's what we're talking about here. But Melanie, tell us, what would normally happen to those leaves if they weren't becoming Piñatex?
Yes, absolutely. So normally these leaves are, after 2 cycles of growth, then the plant and then the leaves of that plant actually are waste. And so there's several things happening. Either it's left to simply rot in the fields, or in the worst case scenario, it's being burnt. And obviously, as you can imagine, that releases harmful substances in the atmosphere. And if it's left to rot, it actually takes a lot of time to decompose, because what prevents it actually from decomposing efficiently is the fiber that is still within the leaves. And this is where our technology is creating all these virtuous circuits, I would say, because once we extract the fibers from the leaves, the biomass that is generated and is left can then be efficiently used as compost and as fertilizer and going back into the fields.
Interesting. So what's the origin of this? Like, how did somebody look at these leaves that are just generally considered like an agricultural byproduct of the pineapple industry and think, we could make that into leather?
Yes. So first of all, that technique of extracting fibers and using the fibers has already been used for centuries in the Philippines. So they manually extract the fibers and use it for very delicate woven material. They produce beautiful shirts and dresses that are used for ceremonies like weddings or important events. But it's a woven and it's very delicate. And our founder, Dr. Carmen Hirosa, was actually a leather expert all her life, and she had several brands, leather brands. And in the 90s, she was sent to the Philippines to work and help improving the leather production by consulting work. And so she obviously visited tanneries, but she also discovered this ancestral technique of extracting fibers and making a woven material out of that. So she had, I would say, a double inspiration. First of all, she was obviously really made aware by the working conditions in the tanneries in the Philippines and obviously other developing countries back then in the 90s. Obviously, the harmful impact on the environment, also the social and the working conditions that were not as good as they're probably today. But also then the inspiration of the use of that fiber, what you could actually do out of pineapple fiber. So by combining both together, she thought to find a way to create an industrialized way to valorize these fibers into a material that could be strong enough to be an alternative to leather. And her idea was to develop a non-woven material that could actually match the properties, as close as possible, match the properties to a leather.
Interesting. So she already had that background in the leather industry, so she was perhaps primed to be thinking about leather and leather alternatives just because of her background. So is she still involved with the company now, Carmen?
Yes, absolutely. So she's the founder, and she's still obviously heavily involved as the, obviously our brand ambassador, of course, but also still looking at the aesthetic, the design side. She's still heavily involved in the innovation processes. She's always the one foreseeing new trends years in advance and triggering new ideas and triggering innovation. But she's also more and more involved now and moving into developing our social projects that we're going to do far more. So she's still very much involved, and big inspiration for everyone in the team.
I can imagine. So the product, though, is not only pineapple leaves, right? And so you do add some other things. So tell us, what else is in Piñatex aside from those pineapple leaf fibers?
Yes, it's mostly pineapple leaf fibers, and which is quite unique in the alternatives, in the sustainable alternatives industry, I would say. So the first step is to create, this non-woven mesh, which we call a substrate, and that is composed of 80% of pineapple leaf fibers. And then we add to that PLA, so polylactic acid, that helps as a binder, and that at that stage we obtain 100% biodegradable substrate.
Mm-hmm. And the PLA is from corn?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. It's corn based, and absolutely.
And so those who aren't familiar, so corn PLA is it's a fermented plant starch from corn that is essentially, if you ever see biodegradable cups or plates being sold, typically those are made out of corn PLA. So basically what you're saying, Melanie, is you got 80% pineapple leaf fibers and then presumably 20% corn PLA in there?
Exactly. So this is what we then call our felt, piña felt. And then from then onwards, we have several options to apply different types of coatings and finishings to produce our Piñatex and produce it in different product lines that will then match the different properties that are required to enter diverse markets.
Interesting. Well, I want to talk about those properties, but just real quick before we do, Melanie, how many plants do you need to do this? Like how much pineapple is needed in order to start making actual Piñatex leather?
Yeah, look, we use about 25 kilos of leaves per square meter of Piñatex.
Okay.
So it's about 460 leaves, roughly.
Okay, that's more helpful for me. Okay, so 460 leaves, and from looking at my completely non-extensive research on pineapple plants, my guess is that's like around 15 plants. Is that right?
Yes, it really depends on the how many actual leaves you can use. So roughly you can use about 50% of the leaves of a plant, because we try to really focus on getting the longest leaves, the ones that are not too damaged. So yes, roughly it's about that. Yeah.
So Melanie, what is the cost difference here for Piñatex? Like, let's say you're comparing it to a luxury leather. Is Piñatex going to be cheaper than it? Cost competitive? More expensive? Like, where are we right now on trying to reach cost parity with leather?
Yes. Compared to luxury leather, we would be significantly more cost effective, because our target is to be equivalent in price to a premium to medium-sized quality leather. And what is also important to take into account is when you buy leather hide, you have up to 40% of waste. Whereas when you purchase a square meter of Piñatex, you can use all of that because it comes in rolls, and it's a continuous roll, so you can just purchase as many meters as you require, and you can use the full width of it.
Fascinating. And so that waste presumably is because cows very stubbornly do not grow in the shapes of car seats and shoes and wristbands and so on. That's what a lot of the waste is from, or are there other reasons for the waste in the leather industry?
Yeah, no. So it's when you actually get a leather hide, you would to have a really uniform square meter out of a hide. So you would have to cut off everything around. It comes not in a square or rectangular shape. Whereas us being delivered as in a roll, you can. There's no shape limitation, so you can use the full width of the material that is being delivered.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think also, cows might have, either scars or insect bites, or maybe they've been branded, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons you might have imperfection in the hide of a cow that presumably would not be the same with Piñatex. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, what we say, I mean, typically with our original line, we call it original because it's the first one that has been created. It has, I mean, it comes in different colors and finishes. But we have one line with our natural colorway, which actually comes without pigments. And here you can really see the natural fibers. And sometimes there are just some we call flax, which is just part of nature. And so we always explain to our customers that from batch to batch there might be slight variations in the tone and of this natural colorway, and but this is really inherent to the fact that it's 100% natural material.
Wow, that is really cool. Well, I've looked at photos of it online, and it certainly looks like a beautiful material. And I want to talk about where people can get it. But first, in terms of its functionality, so let's say I am a fashion designer, and you all send me some samples of Piñatex, and I'm accustomed to working with leather. Like, what will I find different, or will I find it identical to working with leather?
Yes, I mean, first of all, the good news is it's quite easy to use. It's fairly identical to leather. As always, you need to adjust to any new material, but you can make out of it anything, pretty much anything that you can do with leather as well. Um, uh, you can cut it, use it in normal stitching equipment. You can print on it. You can emboss. So there's almost nothing you could not do with Piñatex, which is really the beauty of it. And we're very, very excited to work really very closely with all the brands that use Piñatex and have new ideas and actually discover together new potentialities for the product. And so we learn a lot, and we have accumulated a lot of, I would say, best practices and know-how on what you can actually do with Piñatex. And we happily share that with other brands that then actually, as a Q&A, so we can share everything we have already accumulated in terms of knowledge and obviously save time for others who join.
Nice. Do you have plans to put out your own products, or do you plan to just to be a B2B, essentially fabric supplier to other companies for them to replace their own leather?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. I think for now we really want to concentrate on I mean B2B, um, expanding our range of materials, working on this continuous improvement. And potentially what we might do at some point is develop a range just as a benchmark to give brands more of a visual interpretation of what you can do with the material, but we would not at that stage plan to commercialize. No. And as always, we're growing young business, so we have to prioritize. And for now, we work on B2B, developing our material.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that young business because, Melanie, a lot of times we hear about these really cool technologies, people who want to, replace animals from the food supply chain or from the fashion supply chain. But oftentimes those companies, while they have a really cool technology or a cool product, they spend years before commercialization, if they ever commercialize. Some of them, are around for a decade before they sell anything, or they have symbolic commercialization, like with one product in one store. But that's not what you all are doing. You all have actually had pretty substantial market penetration. So I'm eager to hear how and when that started happening. So if you don't mind, Melanie, just take me through the birth of the company to how long it was before there were products on the market, and then who some of those partnerships are with now.
Yes, no, thank you. That's a great question because you really put forward what's so strong about us, I would say. Yes, I mean, first of all, it all started really when I said, back in the 90s when Carmen had this major inspiration and insight on creating and having this idea of developing a non-woven material out of pineapple leaf fibers. And obviously, it took a few years then also for her to I mean, she was in her late 50s back then, to completely change life and to really drop her previous life in the leather industry. And she decided to develop this material, but together with while doing a PhD at the Royal College of Art. So the business got incubated at Royal College of Art. And then this is where I'd say it's really the birthplace, where it's all really started to be shaped into an actual, I'd say, proof of concept from an R&D point of view. And then really it reached the stage of, I'd say, between 2013 and then 2017. It was really the time when the company Ananas Anam was created, when Piñatex had been developed and the supply chain had been put in place to actually be able to commercialize the product. And then since 2017, it was all about scaling that supply chain to produce every year double the volume we produced the year before. And at the same time, continuing working on improving the material properties and keeping the right balance in improving its sustainability credentials.
What was the pitch then? Like what is the argument to the producer? Let's say, I am a, shoe manufacturer and you come to me, Melanie, and say why I should switch from leather to Piñatex. What are the arguments that you're using?
Yes, I'd say today we are the only vegan and sustainable alternative to leather that is commercially available at scale on the market.
So tell me what type of, when you say the only vegan alternative that's sustainable, presumably you're referring to, plastic-based leathers like polyurethane and other so-called pleathers that are out there. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because vegan is doesn't mean it's sustainable. And so we have both.
Okay, well, that's great. So is that what is compelling? Let's say, like, for example, you are partnered with companies like Hugo Boss and H&M. Is the sustainability argument what's compelling to them? Do they agree that there's a problem with leather? Like, what is it that's leading them to make that switch?
Yes. So, first of all, obviously, PU or PVC material has been up to a few years ago the only alternative for non-animal leather alternatives. But companies like H&M, Hugo Boss, and the hundreds and hundreds of really, vegan and sustainable fashion brands out there, they are seeking, obviously, to find the best material that can answer both worlds. I mean, first of all, there is a real, important vegan demand out there, and started obviously in the food industry, and now it's going very much all into the materials industry. So that trend has been building up over the years. But I think in addition to that, and that has really, really increased over the last 24 months, is to actually make sure that the vegan alternative is also as sustainable as possible, and is addressing all the elements that you can measure in terms of carbon footprint, in terms of water usage, in terms of energy usage, and also the understanding of what goes actually into that material, what are the resources, the raw materials that go into the material, and what is its end of life. And I'd say that over the last, as I said, 24 months, I think the awareness, I'd say from the end consumer, to start with the end consumer, has really, really increased from that side, and has also automatically put more pressure on the fashion companies to come up with better solutions. But also the fashion industry is obviously put under a lot of pressure, and there is a lot of, say, movement now from their side to develop long-term sustainability strategies, to completely review their material sourcing. That is one of the main causes of why the fashion industry is so polluting. So there's now a lot of momentum into kind of really tackling the problems at their root. And this is where we bring this solution that really ticks all the boxes. And in addition to that, and again, we're the only ones to provide that, is to provide a social impact as well. First of all, we can measure the positive impact we create, for instance, now in the Philippines. We measure how many jobs we create and in deprived rural communities. We measure the additional turnover that is given to the farmers by obviously collecting the waste and extracting fibers out of it. So it creates new opportunities in these communities. And we have a fully transparent supply chain, so we can really measure and share key KPIs from leaf, farm level, all the way up to the finished material when we sell it.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the fashion industry to which you're referring. Let's say, Melanie, that somebody who's an individual consumer like myself wants to get some Piñatex shoes. Where would I go? I know you're partnered with a lot of big name brands. So what are some of the brands that you're partnered with that people can buy Piñatex from?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends. So if you're an end consumer, you want to buy product made from Piñatex, then obviously we're not specifically, we don't have any exclusivity agreement with any brand. So we work with as many brands out there as you can imagine. We work with hundreds of brands. One way to find out where you can purchase Piñatex as an end consumer within a product is to actually go on our website, where we list. We try to keep an updated list of all the brands using Piñatex. Following obviously our social media, Instagram accounts, we promote on a regular basis especially the smaller brands using Piñatex. And then obviously the brands themselves, they advertise usually a lot about the fact that they use Piñatex, because they consider Piñatex to be really a brand material that comes with a really high level of credentials in terms of low environmental footprint, positive social impact. It has been made in an ethical way. And that's really the creation of a strong brand that has been one of our priorities and remains obviously our top priority going forward, is to maintain this really, really value-driven ecosystem so that brands are really obviously proud to partner with us, to use the brand name within their communication, and obviously to indirectly benefit also from all the positive impact we generate.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's fantastic, Melanie. You indicated earlier that Carmen was the founder of the company, that she was really the inventor of this type of a technology. And I know that you were not with the company at the beginning, right? That you came on a few years ago. And so tell me just a little bit about your background prior to Piñatex, and what was it that led you to leave that life and go to the life of a small startup company?
Yes. So I started, first of all, from my career point of view, I started 10 years at LVMH, working with the French perfume and cosmetic brand Guerlain. And then after 10 years, I decided to completely change and actually go more the entrepreneurship road, and set up my own food business, and then from then onwards, I worked with many startups or growing SMEs to help them actually structure themselves and to be and to grow. And I think this is where I used the combination between 10 years of really, luxury corporate background, and then I'd say the own experience to set up a business, which has really opened up a lot of this deeper understanding of what a founder, what an entrepreneur goes through, and to combine both, and then actually then build on that and build a growing system and company that is built on more structures, developing and integrating more and more people, and really staying all the way really respectful and loyal to the original vision, to the values, and keep that connection to the founder to make sure that the business is growing, but in the right way.
That's great. That's really great. So what then, Melanie, was the transition like for you? Like going from a large corporate background to coming to a small company? Like if you look back now that you're a few years in, what was the most remarkable thing that you have experienced in terms of that type of a change in your career?
Yeah, I think the transition was really over quite a few years. So it was not as, I would say, abrupt. So I was not literally going from a large corporation into a small startup. So it kind of stretched over a few years. But I think I was always kind of already preparing myself to that, because even within my 10 years in a big corporation, the moments I enjoyed the most was when I was on. I had several positions, and one of the positions I had when I was back at Guerlain, I was on a very entrepreneurial project for a couple of years that was functioning as a startup, but within the structure of a larger corporation. And I enjoyed these years so much, and that was actually the first trigger towards actually I'd like to do something like that. But I think then it's just a combination of, where the stars align from your personal and professional life, you move on and that you find the right opportunity. And I think it's just also then you make this journey, and then at some point you're ready. And then suddenly you realize that all the skills and all the experience you have accumulated over all these years actually have you prepared for that new challenge. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So you've been in the company for a few years now, and I know that it's grown a lot under your leadership. So, what type of revenues are you guys bringing in now? How many people work at the company? Just give us a sense of the scale of this company now.
Yes. So I joined in March 2018. So it's just 3 years now. So turnover, I can't give you the turnover, but I can give you a sense of multiplied by, 5. We could have done more, but last year's, obviously with the lockdowns, it slowed down a little bit our production, but still we managed to have even still deliver growth in 2020 versus 2019, which really shows the resilience of the company, but also it has actually increased the demand. We're growing. We've been doubling every year. And in terms of growth, we're actually heading towards the next chapter of the company, which is now that we've proven the business model, the commercial functioning of that. We have a product that there's demand for. We've proven it through really high profile brand collaborations. We're now really heading towards accelerated growth. And we're going to be fundraising this year to now heading towards multiplying actually our production capability and hence our turnover by 10 by next year.
I hope that happens, Melanie. So I presume that the company has received some investor funding in the past. That's correct?
Yes, it has. It has. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Business angels, a venture capitalist, and really, family offices. But what's always been very, very important for the company is to work with investors, obviously on a long-term perspective, and investors that are totally aligned with our values and how we want to develop the business moving forward. So that has always been a very, very important point for the company.
Nice. And with this upcoming funding round, how much are you thinking that the company may be seeking to bring in new investment?
That we will announce very soon. So it's just a matter of
Okay.
a few more weeks.
All right. Well, for any of you investors or venture capitalists who are listening, keep an eye out and on the Piñatex website, and you can see what the options are available to you.
Yes, perfect.
So, Melanie, you've done a lot in your life. You've seen a lot in your life. You have had, really a few different chapters of your career. So, looking on all the things that you have done, I want to ask you if there are any resources out there that have been helpful for you that you think somebody who is looking at you and is impressed by what you've accomplished and really loves Piñatex, or they want to do something good in the world. Are there any resources you would recommend for them to check out that have been useful for you in your own career?
Yeah, there's really several types of resources, I'd say. First of all, is always try to get as close as possible to the actual entrepreneur or visionary or inventor. And always try to, if possible, meet in person. It will happen again. Go to conferences or obviously watch YouTube videos where these people might be interviewed or speaking at different panels. Obviously, listen to podcasts. I think that's really very. I mean, I really rediscovered that throughout the pandemic as well, because it's a very nice and personal way to really hear directly from all these incredible people what they think, how they see the evolution, and so on. And the last resource I personally use a lot as well is also reading biographies or autobiographies from entrepreneurs, but also from leaders, from CEOs. I mean, it's a whole variety. I mean, to give you a few examples, the ones I just picked this morning, a few that have you learn from all of them. For instance, I read about, when was it, maybe 8 years ago, the from Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In. So that was really, typically also as a woman, that was a really good wake-up call back then. It was when I was really starting my entrepreneurial journey as well, is to say, look, I mean, there's no limit out there. It's just the limits you put yourself. And that was so useful to really, I'd say, just stop constraining yourself and just to go for it. So that was really a good resource for that. And another one which was really very interesting is a Shoe Dog from Phil Knight, so the founder of Nike. That really taught me everything about never give up and always keep going, whatever people think. And then recently I read the autobiography from Robert Iger, who was CEO of the Disney Corporation. And I think that was really interesting from a point of view of growing a big corporation while preserving the heritage and the history of a company like Disney, but then opening up to new digital, new innovation, and the importance of constantly, obviously, having your long-term strategy in mind, but being able to convey it in 3 simple ideas and continuously communicating with everyone so that everyone is aligned behind the strategy.
I haven't read Bob Iger's book, although I want to, but I did read Sheryl Sandberg's book, which I really appreciated. And Shoe Dog also was a particular favorite of mine. I took away from it also what you just said, the desire to never give up. But what also was so remarkable to me was how Phil Knight, this founder of Nike, just the company almost died time and time again. It was like all these near-death experiences that they narrowly averted. It was almost like, reading a novel where the hero is just barely escaping death every time. And it was just, it was particularly amazing because we think of Nike as this, like monolithic brand now, but there were so many paths that it could have gone down that it would have ended in flames. And so I really appreciated that because he talks very frankly about so many of the failures that he and the company had, and it makes it seem a little bit more human to think that, even the most successful companies have all these failures. And so it made me feel a little bit better for my own failures.
And that is so important. And this is what actually also helps me a lot, because you always hear just about all the successes and everything, but, running a growing business is all about the failures as well. And of course but it's all about how quickly you recover from them and what you learn from them and how it makes you grow as a team. And that's, I think, the beauty. And typically was what happened. I mean, 1 year ago, we were in such a different situation. You just felt that the world was collapsing around us. And reading these books when you're in these darkest hours, when you have to completely rethink your short-term, mid-term, but also long-term strategy, just a matter of weeks, it is incredibly helpful and gives you this reassurance, as you say. It's like you're not the only one, and people have gone through much, much worse, and it's totally normal. And that is, I think, very encouraging.
It's certainly encouraging for me, I'll tell you that. So I got to read Bob Iger's book that I know, but we'll include links to all 3 of those books in the show notes for this episode for anybody who wants to check them out. So Melanie, let me just ask you then finally, because you're doing something that's really good for the world. You're trying to help improve sustainability and reduce our footprint on the planet by displacing leather with this plant-based sustainable alternative, Piñatex. But presumably you have ideas for lots of other things that could also be good for the world that you don't have the time to do because you're too busy running Piñatex. So tell me, what are the ideas that you have that you hope maybe somebody listening to you will be inspired by and will want to do themselves and make some positive contribution in the world as well?
Yes, I was thinking about that a lot, and there are already so many ideas out there. And I was actually thinking, you know what? Actually, I would like to appeal to everyone out there, every one of us, to become actually their own entrepreneur for sustainable lifestyle. You don't need to actually build a company or have a crazy innovative idea. I think if you already aim it as a responsible consumer, as a woke consumer, just realize and think about how you live your life, how you consume, how you purchase, and to actually open up, to learn, to challenge the status quo, to challenge probably the brands you used to purchase all your products from, and to act, to really be an active member of your community, the community in which you live. That's I think would be, to me, so important, because obviously we, through companies, we try to move mountains every day, but I think it's can only work jointly when every individual out there makes this journey too, towards a sustainable lifestyle, towards kind of really understanding what it means to be sustainable in your everyday life, and then maybe understand better what companies that are engaged in this path are trying to achieve, and then also connect and support these companies. So that would be a fantastic journey.
Indeed. Well, I personally, Melanie, look forward to connecting with and supporting Piñatex. I'm going to include a link on the show notes of the website to the page on your site, which shows many of the brands that include Piñatex in their products. So if you want to be wearing a really cool pair of pineapple leather shoes or have a pineapple leather handbag, go to businessforgoodpodcast.com and we'll have that link on there. You can check out all the great places where you can get products containing Piñatex, and you can fulfill Melanie's wish to support companies that are out there trying to do good in the world by helping to reduce humanity's footprint on the rest of the planet. So, Melanie, thanks so much for all you're doing. We're really impressed, and we are hoping for your continued growth and your continued success, and look forward to enjoying more Piñatex products out on the market soon, and we'll be following your journey closely.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, and thank you for this fantastic platform to share all these ideas and vision. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found use in this episode. If so, don't keep it to yourself. Please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, we hope you will be in the business of doing good.